As promised, the Pentagon briefing, which we told you about, is now beginning. Let's join that live and see what the U.S. military's perspective is on this breaking news.
U.S. Air Force B-2 bombers conducted precision strikes against 5 hardened underground weapons storage locations in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. U.S. forces targeted several of the Houthis' underground facilities, housing various weapons components of the types the Houthis have used to target civilian and military vessels throughout the region. U.S. Central Command is still conducting a post-strike assessment, so I don't have any details to provide on that front, other than to say that we struck exactly what we intended to hit. We'll provide updates as appropriate. As Secretary Austin highlighted in his statement last night, the employment of the B-2 bomber was a unique demonstration of the United States' ability to target facilities that our adversaries seek to keep out of reach, no matter how deeply buried underground, hardened, or fortified. And it demonstrates U.S. global strike capabilities to take action against these targets when necessary, anytime, anywhere. It also sends a clear message to the Houthis that there will continue to be consequences for their illegal and reckless attacks, which put innocent civilian lives and U.S. and partner forces' lives at risk. Shifting gears, Secretary Austin arrived yesterday in Brussels and today participated in a de-ISIS ministerial, the first session of the NATO Defense Ministerial, and a productive meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council. In his opening remarks at the de-ISIS Ministerial, Secretary Austin highlighted the work over the last decade of the global coalition to defeat ISIS. And I quote, "For 10 years, this coalition has tackled the scourge of ISIS. Our success stems from our resolve, our commitment to working together, and our willingness to adapt. These core elements will remain at the heart of the next phase of our mission," end quote. Tomorrow, Secretary Austin will participate in the second session of the NATO Defense Ministerial and engage with his NATO counterparts to discuss strengthening the collective security of the alliance and international support to Ukraine's defense. We'll continue to provide readouts and updates on the Secretary's engagements throughout his travels. And finally, the Department of Defense continues to be fully engaged with FEMA and the whole of government relief efforts related to Hurricanes Helene and Milton. We'll continue to work with our federal, state, and local partners to ensure we're supporting and coordinating response efforts in support of our fellow Americans. As of earlier today, the National Guard had more than 4,200 guardsmen.
So you're listening to General Ryder at the Pentagon, obviously going through some scheduling and logistics for the Secretary and what have you. I would assume when he starts taking questions, the attention will turn to the killing today of Yahya Sinwar. So we're going to watch that in the control room behind me, and as soon as that does happen, we'll probably go back to it. Retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt standing by to talk to us on the breaking news right now. So, General, thank you. Your perspective on this day, the death of Sinwar and the significance.
Well, I think the two activities that are of most importance, not only the killing of Sinwar, but the attack on the Houthi facilities. While the Sinwar death may be more spectacular, I think the lessons we ought to take away from the Houthi attack are far more significant.
Okay, tell us why, because to your point, that's what General Ryder was talking about at the beginning, before he started going through the scheduling. We joined him in progress. He was talking about those Houthi strikes. More significant than Sinwar. Why?
That's very simple. There is no need to use a B-2 and bombs that can hit what we call hard and deeply buried targets in Yemen. To my mind, that was a clear message to other actors in this region, read Iran, that we not only have the capability to get to the target, but also that we have the capability to burrow our bombs down in order to destroy the target. Clearly, it does not mean we're about to attack Iran. There's a big difference between capability and intentions. But it's what we call in the military the classic mission of a demonstration. We were demonstrating to Iran that if you give us reason, we can hit you, and we can hit you hard, and we can hit you deeply.
What do you expect Israel to do, though, when it comes to Iran? We've been talking today about whether the Sinwar killing what impact that would have on, in the near term at least, in the war in Gaza. Netanyahu says war's not over yet, so I mentioned that a few minutes ago. But what about Israel in Iran at this point? What's next?
Well, Israel right now is playing a pretty good waiting game in terms of the time, the place, and the way they're going to attack Iran. There have been some mysterious bombings going on, explosions in the north of Iran. There are other types of questionable activities going on. So I would suspect that the last thing that the Israelis are going to do is exactly what the Iranians expect, which is a conventional attack on military targets by their air forces.
Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.